concur in the House amendments, that the time until noon Tuesday, August 2nd, be for debate on the motion to concur equally divided between the two leaders or the designees. At noon, the Senate proceed to vote on the Reid motion to concur, that the motion to concur be subject to a 60-vote threshold, that no amendments, points of order, or the motion be in order to the message prior to the vote.
Is there an objection? Without objection, so ordered.
For the information of all senators, it's my intention to have the chair lay before the Senate the House message to accompany S-365 at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow morning, August 2nd. Roll call votes tonight. First one will be tomorrow at noon. Note the opposite corner.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Debt limit that we'll be considering tomorrow is the thermometer, the canary in the coal mine that tells us we are at a dangerous level. For example, we've reached it faster and at higher levels than we ever have, the result of which is that our debt rise is telling us that we have to raise our debt limit. So those things happen periodically, but this one would be the largest debt limit increase in our history, and it is a fact that we've never had such a surge. The deficit this fiscal year, ending September 30th, just for 1 year, would be $1,500 billion, $1.5 trillion. The largest deficit President Bush ever had, and it was large, was $450 billion. The last 2 years have been $1.2 trillion, $1.3 trillion. This year is expected to be $1.5 trillion. We will go from interest on our debt this year of $240 billion to the 10th year under the budget that was sent here by the President. I will acknowledge a budget voted down 97-0. In the 10th year, that 1 year interest would be $940 billion. For example, our education budget is around 100. Our highway budget is around 40. $940 billion will crowd out tremendous portions of the good things we'd like to do with taxpayers' money. Instead of being able to improve our infrastructure or do other things that we think could be good, we will be sending that money, much of it to debt holders abroad, to pay them back for the money they've loaned us that we've been spending now. Because 40 cents of every dollar we spend this year, really 42, I believe, will be borrowed. So that is a situation that's very real to us. But I've always felt that we do have a responsibility to be honest with our constituents, and we are going to need to raise the debt limit. We just have to. It places too much risk on our economy, I think, to not raise it. We might as well be honest about that. We've got ourselves in a fix, and it will have to be raised. But I want to share some thoughts about why I'm uneasy about the legislation that's before us and why I'll not be able to support it. I have been warning for months now that we're heading to a situation in which we will have a last-minute 11th-hour bill and that the Senate will be asked to pass it without adequate time to review it, that other bad things could be included in this debt limit increase, and it's not the kind of process that we need to pursue. Our Democratic leadership decided at some point they did not want to bring up a budget. They instructed the Budget Committee chairman, of which I'm the ranking member, not to bring up a budget. When asked about it, the majority leader said it would be foolish to have a budget. We've gone now 824 days without a budget under the Democratic majority in the Senate. At a time we've had the largest deficits in American history, the largest, none close to it, and we don't have a budget. They said it would be foolish to have a budget, and the question is, why would it be foolish? Because if you pass a budget, and one can be passed with a mere 50 votes, it's given an expedited procedure that can't be filibustered, it's guaranteed a vote in 50 hours, but you have the right to file amendments. And people would have a right to file amendments. And when you file amendments and get a vote on those amendments, then people are held accountable. And they have to vote, yea or nay, whether they think this is a good step or not. And so we've had a lot of people say that we'd like to do more, but we're sorry we can't do more. Well, maybe if we'd had a budget up here, we'd have had a chance to vote for more spending. Or maybe people who are suggesting that really wouldn't be for that. So the problem was that a decision was made that it would be too difficult to execute the normal regular order in the Senate to bring forth a budget and actually have amendments filed and senators do what they're paid to do. Now, I think that's particularly problematic in light of what happened in the last election. American people are not happy with us. They rightly believe that Congress cannot justify a situation in which 42 cents of every dollar we spend is borrowed. That Congress cannot justify a $1.5 trillion deficit this year. They're not happy about that. Now, I've been to town meetings and people say, you work for me. I'm not happy. You've seen that on television in the last election. And it was a shellacking for those who thought that business as usual ought to continue in the United States of America. That money could just be borrowed, and spent, and when the problems get hit, we'll just raise taxes on the American people, and they'll have to pay for our spending binge. So that's kind of what it was all about, frankly. And so we had an election, and it was a shellacking for the big spenders. It just was. And they were demanding, among other things, accountability. They were demanding that we in Congress be responsible for what we do and do it out in the open and stand up and be willing to answer in our town hall meetings and so forth for what we've done. A fair request in a great republic like ours, I think. So I've been a critic of this idea that we won't have a budget, we won't vote. And in fact, we haven't voted. Had very, very few votes. We had the Reid proposal and the Boehner proposal, and finally this compromise proposal. Our colleagues brought up, our Democratic majority brought up the House budget so they could vote it down, and it was a historic budget. It's sick. They did it publicly. They voted on the floor. There were amendments. They reduced spending by as much as $6 trillion. They changed the debt course of America. I would like to have seen them go further, because even that plan to alter the debt trajectory of America, bringing down our deficit, still didn't balance in the 10th year. People say the House was radical and they did strange things. Not so. Read that budget. It was an honest budget based on good numbers, and it changed the debt course of America. But even that, as I said, didn't go as far as we really need to go. So the House, it did its bit, and we did nothing in return. And now we get to the point where the debt limit, August 2nd, is upon us, and we're supposed to vote. So this morning at 3 a.m., apparently legislation was finally put together. And it was brought forth to the floor of the Senate, and we'll vote tomorrow morning, maybe noon, after a couple of hours debate tomorrow. And I'm really uneasy about that, and I'm uneasy about what's contained in it. What does it do? The good part is that it reduces our spending by about $2.1 trillion, maybe 2.4. A more solid belief that we'll reduce spending if Congress adheres to the guidelines, and it can, over a period of years, we tend to figure ways around the limits and constraints that are put on spending. But the plan is to reduce spending by $2.1 trillion. A step. It's better than more spending like we've been doing. In the last 2 years, under President Obama, when the Democratic majority had 60 senators in the Senate, non-defense discretionary spending went up 24%. The budget that the President submitted this year calls for a 13.5% increase in education for next year, beginning October 1st, fiscal year 12. When we're in the worst financial shape ever, a 13.5% increase in spending? Is that common sense? Does that make reasonable judgment? Is that a reasonable judgment for America when we're in a situation like this? It proposes a 9.5% increase in the Energy Department. It proposes a 10.5% increase in the State Department. It proposes a 60% increase in the Highway Department, and they say there'll be a tax. And I ask them, well, Mr. Secretary, what tax? Well, there won't be a gas tax. I say, okay, we agree it's not a gas tax. What is a tax? Well, we'll talk about that. The Congressional Budget Office said that's no income. You can't say you've got income to offset a big increase in high-speed rail and things like that if you don't have a source of the revenue. So that's the kind of situation we find ourselves in. We have a deep philosophical disagreement. The majority in this Senate and the President believe in spending. And when they've been caught after having raised this spending, and when I said 24% increase, that did not include the almost $1 trillion in stimulus package, did not include that, all of which, every penny was borrowed because we're in debt. When you spend this extra money, you borrow the money. We don't have it to spend. So we have a different agreement. We have disagreement about where we're heading in our country. And we should have had a full, glorious debate in the United States Senate. The Finance Committee should be looking at how to deal with taxes. The Appropriation Committee should be asking how can we reduce expenditures. Every authorizing committee needs to be looking at what they can do to do the job better and with less cost and more efficiently. The Budget Committee should be producing a budget that can be adhered to and passed and that would bind the Senate to change the spending trajectory we've been on. But none of that has happened. Instead, we have a bill this morning to raise the debt limit because we spent so much money, we're up at the limit, and if we don't raise the debt limit, there'll be substantial reductions in spending occurring pretty quickly. So that's where we are. In this bill that was produced last night, and I haven't had time to fully study it, I believe it raises serious questions about the United States Senate and how we do business. As I said, I warned that we would be at the 11th hour when this all came forward. I didn't think it would be at the 11th.99 hour at the very last minute, with tomorrow being August 2nd. I thought we'd had more than one day maybe to look at this. So we've got this bill before us. Number of things that are in it. But one thing particularly that concerned me as the ranking member of the Budget Committee is it deems certain budget numbers. And in a way gets around again the budget process. And it's going to give my colleagues, the Democratic majority, additional avenues to avoid producing a budget for the third consecutive year. It just will. That's why it's in there. It was in there for that purpose. I don't believe that's a healthy process. Secondly, I just ask my colleagues to think about this, and I'll wrap up. I don't need to go into great detail about it. But we're being asked to allow our leaders to select up to 12 people who will be on a special committee, and they'll have almost complete jurisdiction to work on any issue they choose. And after they reach an agreement, if they do, that agreement will be presented to both houses of Congress. There will be only 30 hours of debate, no opportunity to amend it, and there will be an up or down vote. And I have to say, the chances of that up or down vote being successful is very, very high, because the product that will come out of that committee will be in harmony with what the leaders who appointed the members of the committee desire, because the power to appoint is the power to control. So the committee will come back with this leadership proposal. It will be on the floor, and it will be for up or down vote, and it's likely, very likely, to pass. Hopefully it will have some good things in it. I don't deny that. Hopefully it will be a very good thing, some very good things in it. But it can't really, it's unlikely that it would go past 2.1 on 2.4, really, 1.2, $1.5 trillion in reduced spending over 10 years. That's the range they've basically been given, 1.2 to 1.5 additional spending reductions on top of the $900 billion that would go in effect immediately with the passage of the legislation. So you come out with about a 2.1, 2.4 trillion total. And I believe that's an insufficient number. It's not close to what we've got to do, because over 10 years, the debt of the United States will increase $13 trillion. 13 more trillion, so reducing it 2 is not enough. It just is not. We've heard the economists and people testify before the Budget Committee, Republicans and Democrats, say that. Many economists said the absolute minimum is $4 trillion, and this will be half that. So that legislation will then come before. We'll have an up or down vote, and presumably it'll pass. And the great traditions of the Senate, full, free, open debate will not occur to the degree that it ought to occur. The regular order will not be followed. The committees will have only an ability to send over advice if they so desire. And as a result, I think we, as members of the Senate, need to ask ourselves, and I know the majority leader and the Republican leader love this body and respect it, but we're getting pretty far away from the traditions of this body. When you don't publicly debate a budget, you create a committee of limited numbers of people to to produce legislation that can't be amended and will only be up or down, and no ability to have a majority vote, but a 50 vote, contrary to the normal process of this body. So for those reasons, I feel like as a senator and a ranking member on the Budget Committee who's wrestled with this for some time, I would not be able to support the legislation, though I truly believe that it is a step forward, and I respect my colleagues who've worked hard to try to bring it forward. I thank the Chair and will yield the floor.
Mr. President,
The Majority Leader.
as unanimous consent, the Senate now proceed to pre morning business centers permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection,
I ask that we now proceed to S. 1466.
the clerk will report.
S. 1466, a bill to establish the Commission on Freedom of Information Act processing delays.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the bill be read three times, passed, motion reconsider be laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate. Any statements relating to this matter appear in the record at the proper place as if read.
Without objection,
I ask consent the Senate proceed to H.R. 2715.
the clerk will report.
H.R. 2715, an act to provide the Consumer Product Safety Commission with greater authority and so forth, and for other purposes.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the bill be read a third time, passed, motion reconsider be laid on the table. There any statements relating to this bill appear at the proper place in the record.
Without objection,
I ask consent that the Senate report number 12-6 be star printed with changes that are at the desk.
without objection,
I ask unanimous consent that the appointment at the desk appear separately in the record as if made by the chair.
without objection,
I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes the business day adjourned until 9:30 a.m. tomorrow morning, August 2nd, following the prayer and the pledge, the journal proceedings be approved to date, the morning hour be deemed expired, the time for two leaders be reserved for use later in the day.
without objection,
Mr. President, the Majority Leader, that's me, will lay before the Senate the House message with respect to the debt limit compromise upon convening tomorrow. The roll call vote on compromise will be at noon tomorrow. If there are no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that we adjourn under the previous order.
the Senate stands adjourned until 9:30 a.m. tomorrow.
So Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid has set the vote on the deficit reduction and debt ceiling bill for noon tomorrow. The Nevada Democrat says it'll need to